And so we start to learn terrible things about ourselves. We start to believe bad things about one another. And that's the strength of media. That's the power of media, is that it affects not only the majority and how their perspective on us, but it affects us in the way that we look at ourselves. And with Uncode, I know that that's our foremost goal, is for Black people to see one another as a diverse community.
What's up, everybody? I go by the name of Domo.
And I go by the name of Yoshiko.
And each week, we sit down with cultural ambassadors
to talk about how they defied societal norms
to live their lives
with no blueprint.
My name is Maisa Plunk Graham. I am creative director, videographer, editor of Uncode, with my husband Ali, who does pretty much everything else in the company. But I'll let him go in further detail about his responsibilities.
I am Ali Graham, the co-creator of Uncode, the founder of Uncoded Media, a local production company that my wife and I own and operate. We put together stories, telling stories of minority communities, stories that are often looked over, bypassed by other media outlets. That's what we try to do. We started the company about a year ago with the intention of releasing a series of short form videos specifically geared toward telling the stories of African Americans, initially African Americans, and that eventually branched out into all Black people across the African diaspora.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you personally define culture?
I told you that I'd listen to this show. You think I have a better answer for that question? It's a descriptive word, I guess. Is that how we're is that what you mean? You mean like personal? How do I define it?
So
a noun. It's a noun. It's a noun. That's my answer.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Look, after episode 3 of season 1 with a read, I've learned to ask that question with caution.
Okay, got it. We heard that he has I don't think my introduction is going to be as grand and great as his. He had Arif does a lot, man.
Yo, Arif is that dude.
Yeah. I met the homie a couple of times. I had an opportunity of meeting him once at Amazon and another time outside. I think of that. Through the collective.
Yep.
We've passed some conversation back and forth. So he's definitely a good person. Yeah, man.
Good dude. How do you define culture?
I feel like culture. I feel like it's a word that you can just look up. But I think for me, in doing this project, culture is as simple as just the things we do, our traditions, our rituals, our tendencies as a community, the things that bring us together, the things that make one another more relatable, and things that add humanity to one another.
For sure.
I felt like super abstract, but culture.
So in this conversation today, I want to be able to talk about the way that y'all bring y'all culture to the media that y'all do, but also broadly talk about Black culture and media, right? And open up that conversation while diving into what got y'all to start telling stories about Black culture and Black folk in general, and so get some of the backstory. All of that in 1 hour. No pressure.
No problem.
But it's funny because we're pretty well versed at it. So at breaking down the story, I have a background in photography, just the technical backstory is just that I have a background in photography. So I had dabbled in the visual arts and visual storytelling a little bit. But in moving to Seattle, we came out here because Ali got a job with Amazon, and we found ourselves in just a very white space, a very white city, racially, culturally, just very white. And having come from Los Angeles, which is known for being a relatively diverse city, and prior to that Atlanta, it was quite a culture shock. And I think what it boils down to is we felt like both in real life encounters, we were lacking a certain connection to Black people, but also in the media that we were consuming, we didn't quite feel that we were seeing content that was speaking to us from us. So that was something that we set out to do. That's real kind of like real short story version of it. But you know, we had again with my background in photography, had the basic necessities to kind of get going, and that I had a camera. So you know, we pretty much had this idea. My husband, I feel like we told the story 100 times, but literally I woke up one morning, he was sitting on the couch and was like, I have an idea. And from that moment, we kind of brainstormed back and forth and came up with this idea to make it a media short storytelling, short content storytelling from the mouths of us to us, right. A FUBU model type of content company. So that's that, and it's been great. I feel like it's gotten us in front of people and talking to people and really given us an opportunity to extend the platform that we're building to empower folks to be storytellers and understand what's possible through storytelling and through sharing one another's experiences. And so it's been great.
Nice.
And that concludes our interview. Thank you.
I felt like it was a great answer.
No, that was really
amazing.
yeah.
Something you said. Where was that couch?
That couch, like literally,
yes.
was in Lower Queen Anne, Seattle, hella white zone. Like whitest part of Seattle. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, it'd be hard for me to say that, but it was a super white. Well, it's go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Seattle Times just posted an article saying that Queen Anne has the most expensive houses. The median price for a house now is $1 million.
I mean, it's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's nice.
And the other thing is that's important to mention about Lower Queen Anne is that with Amazon kind of having a hub relatively close to there, I know Seattle like sections off in neighborhoods, and it's not technically Lower Queen Anne. They're in what's it called?
South Lake Union.
South Lake Union. But it's just so everything around us was so new. It just there was very little flavor. You know, everything looked like it was a new construction, and everyone around us was an Amazonian, and it was just like it just lacked flavor.
It's interesting because I've met so many black people in the last 2 years who landed in Lower Queen Anne, and I don't
So
know
random.
how the hell all of these black folks who aren't from the city end up in Lower Queen Anne.
Yeah. And the sad part is that when you're there, there's really no way to like make the jump to the south end. Like, because no one's there to be like, you belong somewhere else. Like, you need to be elsewhere. Like, no one, we had to, the Uncode is what got us out of Lower Queen Anne and into Columbia City and, you know, into the Central District, and just, you know, meeting people and learning people that have roots here, that have generations of family that come from here, and really gaining an appreciation for the legacy of black people in Seattle. Because I tell you, when you come here and you're not from here, there's really no way, there's no path to here are the brown and black people. Like, this is where we're at. Because we were literally like, there are just like, this is it. Yeah.
It's just
like this is it. It's only yeah. So, man, coming to the South End was quite a lovely transition.
And it's interesting. I ended up in Crown Hill, which is like North Ballard, when I first moved to Seattle.
You came here for school, right?
No, I grew up in Kent, and so
okay.
So I grew up maybe, but I guess depending on what part of Seattle you're in, maybe 20, 30 minutes south of Seattle, but not really knowing Seattle, the city, outside of basketball and outside of when relatives came through. We went to the city. Went off to college at Central Washington, and then after working in Seattle and commuting from Kent, and then coming back from Japan, I moved to Seattle. And I didn't, like everyone else who moved to the city, I don't know what part of the city I should move to. So I moved to North Seattle because I had a friend who lived right upstairs. Quickly, like y'all, figured out this is not the business. And luckily I had a homie who grew up in South Seattle that always told me how dope it was on Beacon. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to Beacon Hill. Like, we're good. And I've been there ever since. Yeah. But it just the difference between being the only person of color on the bus in North Seattle to like hearing like 5 different languages spoken on the bus in South Seattle, like there's a level of comfort that it brings. Also noting that like Seattle is what, the number 4 safest metropolitan city in America as far as crime stats are altered and
Sure.
however they want to put it. But it's also what, the number two, number three whitest city?
Number one.
Top 5? What?
Number one.
Top number 1?
It's
Really?
number one, yeah.
We got Portland?
King County. King County.
It's the number one whitest.
yeah.
Is the whitest. Damn it.
Yeah.
man.
Regardless of what they say about 98118 or
Right?
whatever.
Don't you love
yeah.
that? It's the most, but it's like the very like it's so special the way they word that because they're
Yes.
like it's not the most races, it's not the most diverse,
Right.
it's not the most blah blah blah.
Right.
It's the most languages spoken. Like it's like so specific, and it's like. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that is just white folks love to champion that one. That is their number one. Well, and it's like, girl, please.
Numbers can say whatever we want.
Exactly. No, I was at, and Ali kind of tagged along. I was at like a women in film panel, which was great. And I was super happy to go to and like meet other young women filmmakers and local filmmakers. But at one point there was, it was a panel, and so at the end there was like a question and answer period. And I think in the way beginning of the panel, like maybe the second thing that I said that night was what I said already here is that it was a culture shock to come to Seattle from where we had lived prior to coming here. And this woman was like, you said in the beginning, like literally an hour before, you said in the beginning that it was a culture shock to come here. And she was like, why is that? And I was like, because Seattle is aggressively white. And she was, as an older white woman, she was taken back. Like she could not believe that was my experience. And I mean, I reveled in the opportunity to be like, it's so white. You don't even know how white it is. It's so white. Let me tell you how white Seattle is. Seattle is so white. Anyway.
And getting whiter.
And getting whiter by the day.
But I think-
And so it was just crazy, the audacity to believe. It's just crazy. I mean, to me, it was like it illustrates that just vast gap of just the different experience that we're having and just your inability to empathize with the experience that isn't yours. Like the fact that she was baffled by the fact, have you ever been anywhere and been around all black people? Well, neither have I, and that affects me. You know what I mean? And I think, and just I was thinking about it as you were speaking, I'm always so moved and kind of humbled by how deeply impacted we are by just being around one another. Like it's just around, like there doesn't even need to be conversation. It's just like the presence of black and brown faces around me makes me feel better physically. Like I feel better. And the fact that that's not something that, it's tricky. It makes me really feel a way that it's an experience that other folks are unable to even realize is an experience that's happening. But again, that's that empathy thing that is so tough for people to acquire sometimes.
I just read an article saying that the Central District went from 81% black in the 80s to 18% black now.
Wow.
That many?
Yeah.
17?
That many.
All right.
Listen.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty high, I feel like.
I mean, it feels.
Yeah.
From 80% though?
From 80% though.
In
That's
20,
crazy,
30
man.
years.
Yeah. And, we talk about gentrification. But
What's funny? I was just thinking to myself, I've never lived somewhere that I was uncomfortable living to before I lived there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I am articulating that right, but like, do white people get it that you didn't come here because you were afraid of black people? Like, are they connecting those dots?
yeah.
Like, you have lived in this city your whole life and you never lived in this part of it, and you're not able to connect the dots. Like, why?
Right.
You don't understand that you're displacing people. You don't understand that there was a community there.
Yeah.
Like, you don't understand that you're infringing.
I think they do though.
Okay.
I do. I know they do, right? Because
So they just don't care.
I can't even give that credit, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been on the train and heard people say, "Oh, the Central District, yeah, it's a nice neighborhood. I mean, you have to wait a few years, and maybe you can rent it out to one of the nursing students." And it's like, if you can't read between those lines,
That's
then it's
crazy.
just a conversation. But if you can read between those lines, I know exactly what you're saying,
You're giving them more credit than I do.
right?
Because I immediately assume that they don't. It's like it's it's not even populated.
Right.
Like give it time
Right.
until it's developed. As if there's
Right,
nobody,
right.
as if it's a ghost town now. Like I don't even think that they recognize that there are people living there.
Right.
It's just when we get down there, when we're
It's
able
not real
to,
yet. It's not really. It's not
when
ready
we're
yet.
able to
Still
develop that real
cooking.
estate, then it'll be okay to move.
I think to some people that's the draw. Like, oh, it's so diverse and totally moving there. There's so many different cultures.
I mean,
Totally.
listen. So
Let me ruin
what
it.
I've seen on
taco spot.
Twitter, and I'm forgetting the woman's name now, but she tweeted something along the lines of it's you move in for the culture, but then you call the police on the culture. Like
Right.
this.
Oh, there.
We see what you're doing here. I know
very
because
accurate.
we've seen it
Yeah.
before in other cities, not only Seattle. It's just happening here now
Right.
to this area. And it's going to continue to happen until everybody is displaced and either living in Kent or Renton or Tacoma or wherever else. There was another area. Yeah, there were a couple of other areas in between here and there that are being more populated by black and brown folks. I'm trying my best not to say people of color because I've learned that that's not the ideal term.
I'm so tired.
So as I'm to understand it,
keeping
people
them
of color is defining folks based on whites, and so it's still
All right. Yeah.
we're still existing within their world.
I see.
You have
Yeah.
people, and then those people over there, they're the people of color, and I don't want to describe myself or my people
Yeah.
based on white folks. But this is something that my wife is eloquently
Yeah, that's my thing. I'm like,
explained to
the
me.
more I hear that term "people of color," I'm like, why does that rub me the wrong way?
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those things where I'm like, I'll say it. And I'll say POC because I understand that that's the going term. And language is to a certain extent, like we're just trying to communicate, just to get an idea across, make sure we both are on the same page. I get that. But like, the more I kind of started thinking about it, honestly, it's been recently that I've really started thinking about languages and the way that we kind of talk about things and the way that we label things. And just being like, yeah, people of color is like white is neutral. And then everything else is like people of color, like implying that people of color is, there would be no people of color if whiteness wasn't a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, and
we're
that's-
comparing it to whiteness, and it's like people of color only exist if we are kind of living in a space in which we're kind of do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I feel like I'm not articulating.
well, because I think about what is whiteness.
Right.
Right. Like let's break that down. And in fact, I've started to check people. Someone told me the other day, "Oh, I'm half Vietnamese, half white," and I was like, "So when you say white, what do you mean?" And they were like, well, my dad was from, and it was almost as if like the person had never had to explain that. And I took note, like just a mental note of that, and was just like, yeah, we should start asking people to break that down a little deeper and a little further, and not let you hide behind just that color, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean to not hide behind that color? But before we move forward, we didn't get to ask you where you were from and where you grew up.
Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. So my privilege comes from me being around not only a bunch of black folks, but being around different types of groups of black people.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? Like they're small niche groups. You have like your hipster black folks, and then your blue collar black folks, and then your studied, degreed, white collar black folks, and your athletes and your rappers and your celebrities, in addition to your architects and your dentists and your mayors and police chiefs and school superintendents. So it's different. And me even moving to, Maisa was saying earlier, how we, before we came to Seattle, we were in Los Angeles, just experiencing LA for all of the additional races and ethnicities that city had. That mine didn't, but immediately seeing less black folks in LA, a city that's people are looking at as one of the more diverse cities in the country. It was indeed a culture shock for me to move from Atlanta to Los Angeles to Seattle, where I think more than anything I'm discovering that there was always some anxiety in moving here and even just living and existing here in the city now to this day, but I didn't really know what it was other than just there being a majority of white folks in the city. And I think in me just going over it in my head nonstop, I'm starting to realize that more often than not, it's just me growing real tired of just working all the time. Y'all as black and brown people work a lot more or differently than we did in the South. And by that I mean you're just always cultural ambassador to white folks and just explaining, all right, well, this is what this means, and I have to translate this to you, for you, or even if you don't do that in a number of different ways, or even consciously, you're still doing it. But just because you're the only one there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
in Atlanta, I can count on. When I come across my coworkers or my schoolmates in Atlanta, like I can bet that I'm probably not the first black person you saw today.
Right.
Either it came by the morning news or the person that you interacted with on your way to work or your way to school or something. But here, I mean, it could be Friday, and I could be the first black person you saw all week.
And then
not
you're
even
gonna know
spoke
it
to.
because they're gonna want to talk to you and tell them their one story they tell all the black people they know, and it's become such a chore,
It's a lot.
chore,
It's
like
a
it
task,
really. And I don't know. I'm getting to the point. My mother is European, so I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to own the fact that I, as an individual, have a responsibility, and that I have French, like living with full-on white privilege in Europe, family members. So it's to a certain extent my responsibility to have uncomfortable conversations and just chip away, like just work at chipping away. And it sucks, and it's a burden that as black people, a lot of us feel that we need to carry. As a mixed race black person, I definitely feel like it's one that I have to carry, just to continue shoving uncomfortable ideas in people's spaces that I'm related to.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or that I grew up with. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a toll that the constant code switching. It's a toll that I don't know that a lot of us really kind of even are taking a mental inventory that we're taking on all the time. And again, being cultural ambassadors all the time, just making sure you're keeping everyone comfortable, not ruffling too many feathers. You don't want to be too loud, too aggressive, too blah, blah, blah. And you know what I mean? Like these, just kind of, again, I just feel like I say a lot, like taking the temperature of the room and figuring out, not being yourself, but just figuring out what version to be in a given space to make sure that everyone's okay. Because, not to go extra far, but what we've learned is that making the majority uncomfortable can be harmful.
Right.
And so it's training, and it's self-preservation.
Right. Well, and I think that's why I gravitate. There's a lot of reasons why I gravitate to both of y'all, but one of the reasons is thinking about what does it mean to know your story and share your story and tell your story, right? And the more I interact with folks of color in Seattle, I start to get this feeling that folks don't acknowledge the power of knowing and sharing your story. And I had a meeting the other day down at Rainier Beach High School. They were talking about renovating Rainier Beach High School, which hasn't been renovated since 1960. And there's a whole backstory behind it that I would take a whole podcast to get into. But one of the students was like, oh, well, don't put the entrance on Seward because that's where all the shootings happen. And I was like, man, like, that's the story that you know about Seward. And that's not to take away. Maybe the young lady saw a couple of shootings on Seward. But if that's the story that you know, and that's the first thing that comes to mind about your neighborhood, what does that mean psychologically, and how are you telling your own story, right? And who's giving you the tools to really dig deeper and understand who you are in this context? And this is just high school, right? Let alone having to go out to where you'll maybe go further north into Seattle, into the city, and have to deal with trying to now tell your story in a different context. And so I worry about that. There's no real question there, but
Go ahead.
Well, I think at the same time, working with high school students and having them try to get their story out for personal statements for college admissions applications, I think a lot of times they don't realize they do have one because they think, oh, I'm just like this, I'm just like this girl or this guy. I don't really have a story. I'm the same. We're both just high school seniors,
Right.
doing this, doing that. So I don't think they know, even if that could be a story or they have a story, they're like, I don't know.
Right.
I think that's so much of what our intentions are as well with Uncode, is just like empowering people to be like, you got it. You don't need any extra tools like steps, ingredients.
Right.
You just do.
Yeah.
Just do. And I mean, it reminds me oftentimes, like, I would never was like a real vigilant diary writer, but like the few diary entries that I have, I always go back to, and it's super interesting to like read about where I was at like 12 or whatever. And when I was writing it in that moment, I was like rushing through it, not interested, like not thinking it would ever be interesting to read back, but then it is. And I think that's the power of storytelling, is like you don't always know in the moment that this is a thing, this is a moment, this is a special time, because you're in it, and you're very seldom are we in the moment that we're in. We're usually like thinking about yesterday or thinking about tomorrow. But I think that retrospective kind of, that the ability to be able to be in the moment and understand the power that you have in your experience, whatever it has been up until now, that's powerful. And even if it's not powerful for you right away, like it could be powerful for someone else.
Right.
And that's another thing that we were trying to like help people come to, is like, you have it. You have what it takes to potentially impact someone else and influence someone else, or just edify someone else on what your life is like. Because I think the more that we learn that we're all super different, the more we'll feel okay being whatever it is that we are. Not feeling like there's a mold or some sort of expectation, which I think people of color, minority folks have, I think, doubly, just the expectations and roles and kind of stereotypes that we're always kind of trying not to like die, you know what I mean, like fit in with, and just all that pressure.
I think everybody has a story. I'm one of those people who, I mean, kids are boring. Tell boring stories. But I think for the most part, I mean, we have like nieces and nephews and cousins, and just they have boring stories. But I think there are a lot of interesting things that happen over the course of a day, and I think it's important for people to understand that within you, there's something interesting and special about you, and it's just a matter of feeling comfortable enough to share that with other people. As Maisa was alluding to, even if you don't really know how it might be able to help you, someone else hearing it might be inspired, or might be motivated to go off and do something, or even just seeing you in all of your mundane day-to-day type of thing might, be shot or edited or with a really cool song in the background to come off kind of cool. So when people see it, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's a piece of art now. We saw you painting a wall, and that was kind of it. But it looked cool. Right. So now I'm thinking of how I might be able to finish the piece that I was working on, or I might be inspired to become or whatever.
Yeah, seeing representation.
That's it. Yeah. That's all it is.
And I think, like, even as it connects to before we even get to media, I think about the going to school and like writing letters for scholarships. And I've had like someone who was a person of color come back and say, hey, like, this essay that you wrote for this scholarship, that's not what they want to hear. They want to hear about your struggles. They want to hear about all of the obstacles you had to face. And I was like, that's not my story. I wanted to, like, that's not the story I want to tell for myself. That's not the story that I want them to hear from me. And too often we don't write from an asset like based, and we're not allowed to be proud of who we are and the hard work that came into like being who we were, right? The hard work that it took for me to be Black in America in 2017 and still be here, like, and still doing my thing. And so I often, and then I'd look to media, right? And so thinking about, 12 Years a Slave coming out, cool, playing everywhere, huh? Every theater.
I mean, it's a movie with Black people in it. Right. So to that end, I think I've supported as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, for real.
With that said, though, I know that story, even if I didn't know that story. So I don't feel like I have to really go watch it. And I feel a way with white people watching it, because then, like, if there's any moment where there's some levity or like a joke to break the tension in the film or in the piece, then I'm like, you don't have license to laugh at that. Be uncomfortable for the whole 90 minutes. Like, just sit there and take that L. That's how this is gonna work. You're gonna be uncomfortable because I'm uncomfortable watching this. I have to go back to this time now where I'm seeing people who look like me get beat on screen. Right. I deal with this shit all day, every day anyway. Now I have to pay $9 to go see it. Right. No, like, this is not what this is. But with that said, we also to the same. So Steve McQueen, a great director. Yeah. I hear that movie was shot really beautifully. It was well acted. I hear. I don't know. I've never seen it. I don't plan on seeing it. I read the book. That was enough for me. I'm good. I don't need to go into it any further. And The Help and The Butler and all that. I mean, I'm sure that they were.
I'm sure these are great,
well-paying films, and everybody's check cleared. But that's as much.
They were also called The Help and The Butler.
And
like, I feel like the name alone, I'm like, didn't they hit eject? I'm not interested.
Shout out to Ava for directing Selma and all that.
Ava's amazing.
I'm telling you, that
She
woman,
was
like, we've
those-
given a number of interviews where I've credited her of being a household hero and just being inspirational to us, and you know how we look at the stories that we create. But at the same time, I don't want to go see Selma.
Yeah.
And I felt a little uncomfortable walking my dog around the
Pacific
park.
Science Center, like where the
and
Space
when they
Needle
do
is.
the movies outside, and it was just a bunch of white people laying in the grass watching Selma.
Like, why do you guys want to do this? Like, this is not a good night. This is not like
at the
a
same
happy.
time, it feels
was like
kind
a
of like a
family
throwback to
night.
yesteryear, where they're like, look how comfortable it was.
Look how
Back then,
we
I just
out
don't
in
know.
line.
But America was great.
That was great. Remember that? Remember when? Nah, man.
MAGA, make America great again. That's I'm like, what days are y'all? I really want to know what days y'all talking about, because that's what I'm thinking they talking about when they had us in line, when they had everybody in check.
At the same time, though, I mean, shout out to all of them because I do think those stories are necessary and important to tell. However, I will say, as I shared before in the Hella Black, Hella Seattle podcast, shout out to them, that if you don't tell the whole story or additional stories, then you're not really doing our communities a good service.
Well, and I think that's my thing, is like there's so many other stories that need to be told with quality, right? Like I think about just even history class as a black student. In American history, black folks were slaves, and then Lincoln freed the slaves. And then Malcolm X came.
Well,
and
George Washington Carver, and then
they'll give you that. You're right. George Washington Carver did peanut butter. MLK came along, and then Obama got look. Maybe you'll get Tupac, but then Obama got elected, and then we're post-racial.
I can't call it. I was born and raised in the South, where we stood up every day and pledged to a flag with a Confederate flag directly under it. So it's just right. So you guys reacted to that, but that's every person living in or who is raised in the South listening to this podcast right now understands exactly what I'm talking about. It was two flags at the front of the classroom. One was the American flag, the other was the Confederate. And you looked in the same direction and put your heart over your hand and said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. And so when that's the start of your day,
right? And
then in February when you're learning about Black History Month, as you alluded to, and you're saying the story starts with your people were slaves, not people who came to this country enslaved.
Right.
But slaves, this is where you started.
Right.
You were born into slavery. That's how your people came to an existence. And I mean, like, even if you're a white kid in that class, you're already looking at the black folks, if you do have any, in your class, you know, in a light already that's not favorable.
Right.
And we have to start from there.
Right. Right. And that's why even thinking about storytelling, right? Like there's so much that happened. Like I love history, because there's so much that happened in between all of those times that I didn't get in school. And so I don't read for pleasure and like read for fantasy like I feel like I should be doing. I read because I feel like I missed so much in history and understanding, like there has to be more. And so I'm constantly finding myself reading autobiographies, historical like readings on black folks and trying to understand. So wait, what? How did we end up with the most black people in jail and prison in the United States, and we only make up what percentage of people here? Like, and then like this is all design, right? And so I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? Is like our experience is so often just of struggle, of resilience, of strength, which are great things, you know, I guess nothing that I am not proud to have come from. But there's a spectrum, you know what I mean? And it just seems like a lot of times black and brown folks are not quite allowed, in the media, are not quite allowed to have that same spectrum.
Right.
And that same breadth of experience. Our stories are always this way and of this type of kind of like this narrative. And I think that literally does everyone a disservice.
Right.
Because whether it's, you know, information we're getting from media or if it's in the classroom, in history books, like we're all being fed this same misinformation. So
Right.
while I, as a black student, am learning that I am a slave, you as a non-black student are learning that you come from people that own slaves.
Right.
I'm learning that about you and this about myself. You're learning this about me and this about yourself. And so now we're kind of carrying along this information. We're being taught the same kind of philosophy and ideology throughout our lives.
Right.
And so we start to learn terrible things about ourselves. We start to believe bad things about one another. And that's the strength of media. That's the power of media, is that it affects not only the majority and how their perspective on us, but it affects us in the way that we look at ourselves. And with Uncode, I know that that's our foremost goal is for black people to see one another as a diverse community.
Right.
That, you know, to a certain extent, I think we know that about one another, but there's a real strength and a real kind of, I don't know, a place of power, I think, that we can continue to show examples of the many ways in which we exist and the ways in which we live, to just keep on adding to that narrative.
Yeah.
And just keep on adding facets to this thing that is, you know, our community. And it's vast, so vast.
Absolutely.
You know, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we're trying to show it all, show every way that you can possibly be. And yeah, hopefully it affects our young people now, the future, you know. So hopefully they can take that and be like, oh, I can do that.
Right.
I can be in tech. There's a space for me there. I can be an artist. I can be a plumber. I can be anything. You know what I mean? Like there is no, I'm stuck. Like that is not a thing. That is
Right.
not a thing.
Right.
Don't believe the hype.
How did you originally get into photography?
Well, I've always been interested in the arts. And when I was living in Atlanta, I was kind of trying to pursue a music career at one point, and was kind of interested in photography when I was in college. And outside of college, I was like, let me take photography up again. So I went on Craigslist and found like a $25 camera and bought it. And it was like this little film camera, a little Nikon. And just kind of started walking around the city with my friend, just kind of taking street photography, really, just taking pictures of people that I found interesting. And that's really where it started. So I was doing a little bit of that in Atlanta, and then that continued in Los Angeles, and started being a little bit more professional in Los Angeles, taking more fashion and lifestyle stuff. And then I worked for a fashion company, and just kind of stayed dabbling in photography. And then eventually, again, in moving to Seattle, we decided to take on film. And then I had literally never, well, I shouldn't say that. I did study video. I did study news and broadcast, so I wasn't totally out of my element. I really had not really considered doing videography and doing film at all. When we first started recording, I was very green. I mean, I still consider myself pretty green, but it was a new venture and a new way of storytelling and a new way of kind of using this tool that I had.
Where'd you go for broadcasting? Where'd you go to school?
I went to Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't think we asked you your background. Like, where are you from originally?
Yeah, originally from San Francisco, California, Bay Area representative, 415. And went to school in Nashville, Tennessee, because I wanted to go to an HBCU. So I ended up in Nashville, which was way different than the Bay, as you can imagine. And yeah, I ended up kind of staying in the South after college a little bit, which is where we met. And yeah, I studied radio and television broadcasting. My plan, again, I wanted to be in music. I wanted to be a singer. So my plan was, I was obsessed with Ludacris in high school, and his trajectory was that he majored in radio and television, was on radio, and then kind of segued his career into being a rapper and in hip hop. And so that was gonna be my plan. So I was gonna study radio and television broadcast, and then go off and start a music career. And so that's what I studied. I've emphasized in radio though, so less of the kind of the media and TV stuff. But I did get down in the editing bay back in college days, which have definitely helped me.
Nice.
Like in my current days, like I'm able to kind of lean on those days. But those are my beginnings.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then you grew up in Atlanta. Where'd you go to school? What part of Atlanta? I guess is an important question.
So I moved around a lot, and the reason I bring that up is because it reflects moving around so often and kind of compartmentalizing the people, like the sections. Like I had middle school friends and high school friends and then college friends, and just kind of again compartmentalizing allowed me to work a lot better as a contractor and kind of just coming into groups and corporations and not really attaching myself too much to the company itself. But yeah, anyway, I don't even know why I went to that. Grew up South Atlanta, so everywhere from College Park to Briarcliff after I graduated school, which is kind of like around the Buckhead area. If you guys know anything about Atlanta, it's kind of midtown. I went to Georgia State. Left Georgia State because at the time they didn't have a music major, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to major in something in the music business, and I had an understanding of licensing and contract law. Just because if you're born and raised in Atlanta, you know somebody who's a rapper or a producer or something. And I wasn't too creative, but I would take a lot of pride in helping friends of mine understand the contracts they were signing. And just trying to help them kind of like read it out. This is what this means, and this is why you want to try to get rid of this provision, things like that. And just getting a good understanding of the back end of music, of the business of music,
Right.
while my friends were the more creative types. So that kind of led me down this path of just understanding music law, music licensing. So that's kind of where my world was. And then I realized that Georgia State couldn't provide me with a music business major. I had to play an instrument. And so I knew that I was going to bomb that. So I was like, I gotta change school. So I found a media school in Central Florida called Full Sail. And I graduated with business and entertainment business and law degree. So that kind of kept me in the world of music business and understanding contracts and licensing and things of that nature. So when I came back to Atlanta, I was working as a music supervisor, and I was the person who would be hired to play songs in films and TV shows.
I want to do that.
Yeah, so music supervision became this really cool thing that people like were digging in because it was a dope job to have in the film industry. One, because you just work around just cool songs and you get to be known as like the person who plays that really cool song in that scene. But where I kind of shined was on the back end of that and understanding music licensing and being able to actually secure that song for that placement for a low amount of money and negotiating a pretty good deal. So for the independent producers in Atlanta, the directors, the filmmakers, the independent filmmakers in Atlanta, it was easier on their budget to deal with people like me because I could secure music licenses for a pretty cheap, a fair amount. And also because I knew a number of independent musicians who were really willing and able to license any of the music that they were creating for films. So it was kind of, I had my foot in both worlds, and soon I became the only person in the city doing it. There was one other person doing it who happened to be my mentor. So you had to choose between the two of us, and she would just have conversations with me. She was like, "Listen, you're going to outgrow the city, and for what it is that you want to do, you're gonna move to LA eventually." And at the time, I was like, I'm not going to LA. But sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I ended up somehow working for Warner Brothers, doing some music and film rights and licensing for a number of their titles there.
42.
Yeah, and just working on some really cool projects.
I was like, are we under a code of secrecy?
No,
it was just so.
he plays wasn't it the Jay-Z song in the trailer in the 42
it was a couple of cool things that I was able to work on.
I made it sound so camp. The Jay-Z song.
No, I remember
Sounds so
watching that
corny.
trailer and hearing Jay-Z and being like, oh, am I gonna watch that now?
Yeah, we were in the theater
so
when
I
that
didn't-
played. Like he didn't know that it was.
No, so we got so
Like,
in LA, it was so
it was
it
very cool.
sounds. What it sounds, but whatever.
Just say
In LA, it's like
it's such
in LA,
an
it's a
LA
part of the
story.
right. It's so LA, but I mean, it's a part of the economy. Like music making is just it's
Absolutely.
what people do. It's what you do, and because my position with Warner Brothers, I was able to work on some really cool projects and see my name attached to some things, or see the company I worked for and the department's name attached to certain projects.
Right.
So my name was a part of it, which I grew tired of eventually.
Right.
But yeah, so that's what got me to LA. Was doing that for a little while, working on a number of independent features. Maisa had a song featured,
Nice.
and she doesn't like me mentioning that, but.
And she
No, because they misspelled my name.
They did. But it was a really big,
So bad. Like they spelled it Miles. Like it was a whole other
bad.
name. Like it wasn't even.
It was cool. It was cool because we were
It
able
was
to.
so bad.
We were able to see, we were able to go
So
to a
bad.
movie and see her name.
Yes,
Miles.
Miles.
Not my name. It was like Miles.
The check cleared.
Collage.
The name on the check was spelled correctly, so we were
Right,
fine.
we
It
got
was
the
all
check.
good.
So
But yeah,
ridiculous.
kind of just living in that world is where what we were doing in LA, and just living a life of artists in Los Angeles was a really cool experience. And then I got a life-changing opportunity when I worked with Beats and working with Dre's team and Jimmy Iovine and Luke Wood and all the really cool people who were part of the Beats by Dre team, and just being a part of that world when Apple came in and really getting an understanding of the merger and acquisition process and how tech really works. Yeah, I think that kind of leads us up to to today. I was poached after the acquisition closed and being a part of the legal team with Beats, and once we sold off to Apple and it became Apple Music, is when Amazon gave me a call and they're like, if you want to relocate to Seattle, this is how much we'll pay you. I was like, yes.
So wait, y'all met in
what it
Atlanta
is.
or you met in Los Angeles?
We met in Atlanta, and then I moved to LA,
Okay.
and then she moved to LA shortly after that.
So the two cities that we lived just prior to Seattle were hella different.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride for sure, and trying to just catch the speed of the neighborhood of the city of Seattle.
Right.
And I think I'm discovering that it's the issue in catching the speed for me anyway is just realizing how the work. How you guys have to do the work here that I think I took for granted in Atlanta. We didn't have to do it so much. I could.
There's a lot of real gentle racism here. I mean, it's like I don't want to say gentle, but it's like
This is a different color.
it's like layers. I'll say it's like an onion. Like you just have to peel back just a little and you see it. It's right there.
But
there's like a nice little kind of cover over
It's just
it.
a different color for me. In the South is green, here is blue.
Exactly.
But it's still racism.
There's a sign in our neighborhood. I put it on my Instagram because I was like, so every time I see it, I feel like assaulted. There's this sign, and it makes me think of it too. And we're talking about gentrifying neighborhoods. That these signs pop up, particularly in those areas, and the gentrified neighborhoods. These Black Lives Matter signs, or the one that's like in the rainbow colors, and it's like in this house we
everything.
believe, and it's like all of the ones, which are great in theory, but I feel like I only see those in gentrified neighborhoods. Like I see those in the Central District in white household windows. I don't see them in black neighborhoods. Like you're a gentrifier, and you're trying to pacify the people that you kicked out of their neighborhoods.
Listen, there's $1 million home on the corner of my block that was just built 6 months ago, and it has a Black Lives Matter sign in
You
the
don't
yard.
believe that?
And I was like,
All you did was buy that sign. That's all you did. That's all you ever did for Black Lives Matter, for Black Lives. But there's one though in our neighborhood that I just recently spotted, and it's so slick and just evil. This woman bought. It's one of those We Believe, right? I don't know if you guys know, but anyway, I took a picture. I have a picture of it. She covered up the black on the Black Lives Matter. She blacked it out and replaced it with all. She wrote in orange, and so it's written in orange letters, the Black Lives Matter one, and she wrote in orange writing all. So it's like she modified her sign.
damn it.
She agreed with
She
everything
lived
but Black Lives
everything
Matter.
but that. All
essentially.
y'all can say but y'all. And I mean, this is Columbia City, which is 98118, which is diversity center. Right in the middle of Columbia City, right off Rainier.
Damn it, man.
And it's that's what white people consider progressive. This is I feel every time I walk by that sign, I feel that is malicious. Every time I walk by it, I'm like, you are trying to go to war with me, and I'm just trying to walk my dog. You know?
Make all that effort to
so much
Take
effort.
it off,
Like
you know,
I
and
saw it and I'm
an
like, so
old
you went on
orange
Amazon,
marker.
got your little thing. You also threw in like some black paint in the shopping cart.
Right.
You also went ahead and like found some orange. Like you really went in. Like you had
Yeah.
a shopping cart full of shit that you was gonna modify your little stupid ass sign with. Like every time, I'm like,
for
so was
this.
it in one trip? Like, or did it used to say Black Lives Matter and then she came back and was like, you
Thought
know
about it.
what?
Actually, I agree
Like
with
clearly you're a
everything.
crafty ass bitch. You got maybe she just had her shit on deck already. Like she just had her little tools and she just was like, let me get my orange. I just was so every time I
Was
walked
this
by that.
premeditated?
It's so obviously it's hella premeditated. She was like, it's an orange. Oh, let me buy orange.
Right.
Like
Orange 30,
ugh.
let me match it.
Right. You know, right Pantone.
It might be a compromise. Like she might have been given it by like
Right.
her daughter or something like that. She's like,
That's so
I
funny,
agree
the
with 98%
backstory.
of this,
The backstory.
but not that one line.
Like,
so
I'll put
up,
it in the
but it's
yard,
gonna-
but-
I'm gonna change. We're gonna
That
take
one
that black
line.
off.
I just don't like that it says
It's
black. It just
just,
sounds so Black Lives Matter. The psychology. I want the backstory. It's basically the conclusion. Is I want to knock on her door and be like, what? I also want to knock on her door and be like, you know, your sign is vandalized. Like just to see. You know, did you see what someone did to your sign? But anyway,
What if someone gave
People
it
are
to her
crazy.
like that?
and she didn't notice.
I don't want to give her that much credit.
I know.
She changed that sign.
And then so this is the feeling that like, you know,
no, I don't agree with that.
that we have to carry all the time. It's like the knowledge that it's just beneath the surface. There's this lurking shit, like judgment,
Yeah.
fear, otherness
Yeah.
that people are projecting onto you all the time.
I've become way more pessimistic about institutions like coming to their senses about things, but I've become way more optimistic about the power of my community. And I haven't always felt that way. Not that I haven't been optimistic about my community, but being in this space now as like an entrepreneur and having to like really rely on my community to get shit done has just empowered me from a standpoint where it's like, no, I'm not waiting for somebody to give me anything.
I mean, you don't have to. You got the support system.
I'm gonna.
That
Well, and then they won't. Like,
Yeah,
And also they
it
won't.
doesn't
They're not
work.
gonna- they're not
It
gonna
doesn't
do it.
work in their favor to extend the olive branch. It does not work in their favor to give us to
Yeah,
create
like,
spaces with
financially, that
equity. It does
doesn't-
not make sense for them to. This is like you said, it's by design. Well, it's by design because it works in their favor.
Absolutely.
it works in their favor to continue experiencing living with privilege in this country and
Right.
you know, so on and so forth. But like it works in their favor. And so there's no reason for them to hand over and be like, okay, fine, we'll share.
Yeah.
No.
You're right.
But I think
Why?
Let's do, man.
If I'm-
You're right.
If I'm understanding you correctly, then I think in light of that, and
Yeah.
even with knowing that,
Yeah.
there's an understanding that comes along with that where you're like, but also within my own
Right.
space with my own people,
Yeah.
I might be able to reach a new level or a different level of success,
Right.
which is our own now, and
Right.
is something that we can relish in
And there's
feel
like a
comfortable
real, and
with.
there's a real sense of empowerment in that, like building that autonomy and that we
Right.
don't need a cosign. We don't
Right.
need that. We have enough to just rely on one another and do fine.
And I want y'all to talk about some of the other stories that y'all have already released and told. And yeah.
So the first one was Tarek.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was the Feed the People story, and
Shout out to Tarek.
Yeah,
shout out
Tarek
to Tarek.
Abdullah, Chef Tarek.
Yeah, so the story essentially just tells him and the effort and the work that goes into this. We filmed him late last year, so I want to say maybe October, November of 2016, when he was doing the pop-up brunches around the South End,
Morningstar.
specifically at the Morningstar brunches, specifically at the Royal Room on Rainier. And we had attended. We had a couple of people who had told us of the event a couple of times. So we just kind of wanted to, one, get an idea of what a pop-up brunch was, the type of work that goes into it, but also try to get him to share the story for other people who might, want to, or who consider themselves to be chefs or might, be interested in going into that field, that industry. What it takes to make some money on a weekend, and you need this. You need this team of people. You need someone in the front of house, someone in the back of house. Second, I don't know, with the second chef, is that the term? I don't know what the
A line
term is.
cook.
Sous chef, that's what I'm looking for.
Sous chef.
It can be homeboys. It can be people that are at your church, and if you have these people who are willing and able to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, then everybody can get paid. And this is, you come up with a menu and blah blah blah. So that was kind of the first story that we released. The first story that we shot was Miss Liberation, which included Aramis Hamer, as she painted the mural, the 130-foot mural outside of the KEXP building.
Shout out to Aaron.
And that was just
mural
all
is
Maisa's work. She came
Lower
into
Queen Anne
contact with
Seattleites.
Aramis early in 2016. And then we caught up with her again, or Maisa caught up with her again as she was painting outside, and she was just like, we need to tell the story of how this happened, who you contacted in the city, or who contacted you, and all the steps that you need to take in order to get this mural on the side of this building. So again, our audience can look at it and go, oh, okay, it's not that hard. She's magic, and like you were describing Nikita Oliver, definitely magic, but the magic is tangible. It's nothing that can't be recreated.
It's real.
Right.
And it's something
We're
that
magic,
you can
but
do.
we're real.
If one person can do it, you can do it.
Right, and it's
Absolutely.
not so. It is a Herculean effort. It might be a ton of work, but if you do step 1, then 2, then 3, then you also
It's
can do
available
this thing.
to you.
Yeah, 100%. So from there, I think the next one was Dominic. And Dominic was or is a drag performer who performs at our place here in the city, Capitol Hill. And I always describe this dude as just a
Local
ball of energy.
Seattleite. He's been born and raised in Seattleite. What's interesting is that he, in telling us his whole story, went to a all black prep school here in Seattle that we had kept hearing about, called Zion Prep.
Zion Prep. Shout out to Zion Prep.
Shout out to Zion Prep. R.I.P.
Complex now.
Yeah, so we live there.
So we live there.
Oh,
So
So
shout out
we
to
didn't even
the
know
gentrifiers.
that we did that. But we did that. Like, we learned the other day, and they were like, like we were talking, I think it was Christy of that Brown Girl Cook. Shout out to
Yeah.
Christy.
Shout out to Christy
Like,
Brown, man.
hella name drops. But she was like, we were like, I'm buying gentrifiers and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh yeah, she was like, that. I was like, now that we live in Columbia City, we live. She's like, where do you guys live? And I was like, we live right across from the Columbia City train station. She was like, oh, well, what's interesting is that used to be an all-black prep school. And I was like, well, damn. We
Right.
just,
and so this is just me bullshitting
flipped the neighborhood
with
up.
Google Earth and just,
Right.
put your address in and you mess
So
around
sad.
and see.
Like a time.
Right.
Yeah.
You see the picture of what it used to look like in 2015 or something like that. And I'm like, ooh, well, this is how it happens. Like people from out of side, we moved here because I had a job at
disconnect.
Amazon.
They don't tell you about what used to be
Nothing.
here. When,
Right.
you know what I mean?
About
And
this
that's that
community prior to
disconnect.
getting
It's
in.
like, as gentrifiers, which we absolutely are.
Yeah.
You don't get the story. They don't, and that's again another thing by design. It's like, unless you dig, which we have because we're black people and we wanted to
Right.
connect with other black people, and we've since learned about the history of black folks in this area. But white people aren't going to do that. They
Right.
don't. You know what I mean? They want
Right.
a nice little new apartment that's close to work.
Well, and I've been talking with a friend, shout out to my homeboy Chev, just about the thought of gentrifying, right? Like, cause even myself, I didn't grow up in Beacon Hill. Like, I moved to Beacon Hill, and I can afford to pay for this rent
Right.
over here. So
Right.
me and my fiance and my roommate all
Yeah.
put together, and we moved over here. And I was like, damn, like, ooh, like that's layer 1 of gentrifying. Like, ooh. And he was like, well, he was like, don't really think about it that way, cause you still
That's how they get you,
still
'cause you're like-
support community.
you're kinda
And I
like
was
mind freaking yourself.
I was like, no, that's still level 1.
It's level 1.
That's
That's what I'm
still
saying.
level
Like, and there are
one.
levels to this shit.
Yes,
like, real
there
talk,
are
there are levels to this shit.
massive
Next is
levels.
Subway, and
Right.
after Subway is Starbucks.
Right,
Like,
right,
it's
right.
like levels to
so
it.
in the area that we lived in Los
Downtown
Angeles,
LA, yeah.
we lived on Main Street, and at the top of we can go to the top of our building, and Main Street in downtown Los Angeles is kind of like a marker.
Yeah.
If you look to the south of Main Street, and I mean the street next is Skid Row, is what they call Skid Row. So
I
just
know.
tons of homeless people, just houseless people just out there on the street. And you look to the other side of Main Street, the other side of my building, just walk to the other corner if you're on the roof, and then they're bankers and architects and attorneys that live on
The
that
financial,
end. So you can see the dividing line
There's
there.
a line,
And I
yeah.
remember when we were on the roof, just kind of kicking it, and I remember we spotted like a Subway, and I was like, "Oop, it started."
A Subway on the Skid Row side.
On
We
the
were like,
Skid Row side, it's like, yep, this is how this is
That
how it
wouldn't have
starts.
been there
Starts
6 months
Subway.
ago.
Right.
Right.
And then
Like, that's
sure
that- they
enough,
planted that flag.
We moved shortly after that, because we came to Seattle, and then just me looking at LA News maybe a couple of weeks ago, up to a month ago, shot up, and I'm talking thousands.
But I mean, honestly,
thousands of
us
dollars.
even-
so much so that the people in downtown Los Angeles right now are saying that their rent is comparable to Beverly Hills rent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is 2017. We've not been gone that long.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's important to say that even us living in that building, that was level 2. Like it had already started because people that I had met that I don't know very much about LA prior to moving there, but people that we had invited to come visit us that were from LA were like, "Where do you guys live?"
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, we live downtown LA. Like, what? Where though?
Yeah,
On
yeah.
Main? Like, we were like, it's a dope apartment. Like, you're
And
gonna
they were
love it. And they were like,
like,
are you sure?
Right.
So already,
Yeah.
it had started, and
That's
so.
crazy.
Yeah, it's
So,
levels, little
you know,
baby steps, and then it's all of a sudden 2 years later, your whole neighborhood is flipped,
Right.
and you're looking like,
You
what
can't live there
happened?
anymore.
That's
Like
crazy.
it happened so fast.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So after Dominic,
Yeah. Okay.
what?
So
Say what?
so Dominic was
Oh, yeah.
So the just a story about the drag performer, but more than that, just who he was as a person, why he went into performing.
Yeah.
Just a good time if you want to go support dancers and
Right.
and showmen
Right.
here in the city. Shout out to Dominic. Go see
Shout out to Dominic.
Amora.
And it was
on
also
Saturday nights
really,
at our place.
critical for us to like right out the gate have some LGBTQ representation in the way that we depict Black folks because we
Yes.
have a real problem with homophobia in our community.
Yeah.
And that is something that I was immediately like, nope, not on this platform. There's no room for that.
That's real.
So, and obviously, like with anything, I think representation. You know what I mean? The more that we start to just meet people. Okay, so he happens to be a man that enjoys the company of other men.
Right.
Side note.
Right.
That is a side
Right,
note because
right.
first and foremost, you're meeting this person. And so I think that the more we start to normalize one another as people, the less we start to feel comfortable hiding behind these stupid ideas that we have.
Absolutely.
In addition to the fact that he is just a star and just the most lovable
Yeah,
person
that was
ever.
made to be in front of a camera.
Side
Yeah.
note, shout out to Northwest Tap Connection because they're working on a project called Black Boys.
Okay.
Word.
And it's supposed to be some pretty dope stuff.
They had a really great, yeah. They had a
Yeah.
really great short. I think that premiered at the SIF. That was
Hell, y'all
so
talking
good.
about?
I'd only
Yeah,
seen like
it's-
bits of it. They were so good.
That's fire
so
too.
so good.
That's
so
fire
good.
too. I went to their showcase. My mentor's daughter was performing in their showcase, and she's 7 and came out to Are You That Somebody?
Aw,
and shut it down.
so
Shut
cute.
it down.
I work with them. They're amazing.
Yeah.
They're so good.
They're dope.
What I want to do tap.
I know.
Right.
It makes you want to like jump in,
They're
but you
super
can't.
dope.
That's what's up.
And all
Yeah,
of
we need
this,
to connect with them.
all of your videos are on YouTube.
Yes.
All our videos are on YouTube.
and-
There, our longer stories, our longer form stories are all on our website.
Nice.
But to get the full kind of thing of all the stuff that we've made, trailers, teasers, and other little things that we've done is our YouTube page.
Theuncode.com.
The Uncode, and it's UNCOD.
Yes.
Uncut.
People for some reason stick an I in there. So I didn't use Unicode. Which
So-
I don't know why that happens.
It's so we have all of our we produce short form content, so all of our stories are between 2 and 10 minutes. And the reason why we went with that route is in doing a lot of research and trying to discover how Black folks, Black and brown people just in general, consume media. Oftentimes, one, it's through their phone, and the way that they're connecting to the internet oftentimes is through a mobile data plan. So we knew that if we were to produce content and if it was to be shareable, then we needed it to be manageable and viewed on a mobile device. And typically, if you're watching content on your phone, you're gonna tap out like around 10 minutes. The
Right.
sweet spot is like 3 to 4 minutes. But anything longer than 10 minutes, you're probably gonna watch on a desktop or your laptop or an iPad. Anything longer than 30 minutes, you're probably gonna watch on the television. Something like between 30 and 90 minutes, you watch on TV at home on the crib. So if we wanted to produce these stories and get them out to as many people as possible, Black people come second to none in navigating social media and spreading the word and just being trendsetters online.
Yeah.
We knew then that if that's where our audience was, we needed to meet them where they were most comfortable, which would be via YouTube or through sharing our stories on Facebook or Twitter. So that's how you're able
Major
to actually
keys.
start. Right. So
Major
that's how,
key
and
alert.
honestly, this is stuff that we know already. This isn't like this isn't news to anybody listening to
Listen, I gotta.
Black Twitter is a thing that everybody listens to this podcast knows
Man.
exists already.
Yes.
Other
Good
stories?
smoke.
Oh, I was going to say in
Yeah.
our last story.
Yeah. Well, before Good Smoke, we had
Brian
shout out to
Terry.
Brian Terry, who is
Yes.
a chef in
Community
San
activist,
Francisco.
food
San Francisco,
activist.
yeah.
I love that.
Who is doing some really cool things and teaching people how to eat healthy, why they should eat healthy,
How to get access to healthy food,
right.
ways in which we can depend on our community to continue getting access to healthy food, because that is a problem for
It's
a lot
a
of people.
problem, and living in these food deserts, and coming up with just solutions to, get food to people in those areas. Then the most recent
Great
story
Smoke.
that we put out was Great
Great
Smoke.
Smoke,
Yeah,
okay,
shout out
okay,
to
Great
Jesse
Smoke.
Horton and Dr. Rachel Knox and Killer Mike and Nikki Coleman,
Nikki Coleman.
Seattle local, who all looked out to kind of come through with this one.
That's dope. That's super dope.
Yeah, which is side note. Great Smoke is about Black people's presence in the cannabis industry,
Yes.
building more of it, and also kind of showing what we are doing in the industry, both in the cultivation side and in the medical side, and
Explaining prohibition.
yeah.
And
Yes.
why we need to
Oh, and
push
Killer
more.
Mike was in it, too.
Yeah. So Killer Mike broke down or gave us a ton of jewels in regards to cannabis decriminalization
Yes.
and push for prohibition. He considered himself. We consider him a cannabis enthusiast. He says he's a cannabis activist and a people's activist. But I think ultimately it was with him and Nikki Coleman, a future attorney here who studied at Seattle University, I believe, who is, trying to work toward pushing this city and doing some really good work in the city and pushing the people in the city toward, just shining light on the fact that although it is recreational here, Black and brown kids are still arrested at a higher rate than white folks when it comes to marijuana possession and usage. So these are things that we still have to look and take into consideration, even though it's quote unquote legal here in the city. So, just trying to explain all of this stuff to people so that they're less scared of the substance of this miracle plant, this drug, so that we can start to understand its benefits, as opposed to simply being scared of it. Because my parents scared me away from weed when I was early, not because
Was
they
it
thought
reefer madness?
Yeah, right. So it wasn't some. My mom was in the medical field. It wasn't so much. I don't think she bought into the bullshit of it being a gateway drug, but just kind of in the conservative South, you're facing a lot more trouble if you get caught with it than if the white kids were caught with it. So for those reasons, I was kind of just steered away from it. But moving to California, where the culture is completely different, and then marrying a woman from the Bay Area, where Humboldt County grows the best weed apparently on the planet, according to Killer Mike, it was just I was introduced to this product.
Reliable
a little bit,
source.
right? So it was different, and just experiencing that, it opened my mind up a lot toward how much this can really help people, and how much this information is hidden away because it's not controlled currently by pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then those are the two kind of interesting points that I feel like really speak to Black people in ways that are significant. Is one, the top 5 diseases that affect us and afflict us the most are all able to be treated by cannabis. The other thing is, speaking to the cannabis legislation, is that yes, we are arrested and incarcerated at twice the amount of rate. The rate is like some crazy, like double the amount as the majority. But in addition to the fact that we are oftentimes not fully aware of the legislation that now exists that can have so much expunged from people's records. And when I say expunged, I mean reversed, taken off.
Right.
You know what I mean? And when you realize what having a cannabis charge on your record does to you,
Student loans.
student loans, affordable housing, you know what I mean? You're really cut off at the knees in a number of ways. And so expunging those records is critical, and that is a barrier for a lot of folks. Financial, some people don't even know it's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the work that Jesse is doing with the MCBA, with the Minority Cannabis Business Association, is really incredible in that they help people expunge records, but also just edifying folks. This is a thing you can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Flex that muscle, because
It's so dope. Y'all are so inspiring.
I appreciate you, bro.
So are you.
Just in the sense of, it really is, it's as corny as it sounds, it's edutainment. Right? Like,
Yeah.
like
Super corny. Yeah,
it's super corny, right? It's super corny, but at the same time, like, you're creating dope content, but it's like you were saying earlier. It's not impossible.
No, man, and I don't
Right.
think that anybody else is gonna do it. That's why we're doing
Yeah,
it. It's
but
because
it's-
it was a lot of content that we were watching. We're cord cutters. We've not had cable for years,
Right.
So a lot of the stuff that we watch is just online. Vox,
I don't
AJ
have
Plus,
cable either.
Vice.
a waste of money.
ADD, shout out to the black-owned All Def Digital.
Yes.
I keep forgetting to when I go through this list of like Mike and all these online content producers. I tend to forget the ones that are owned by black folks because there's not a fair representation of us. So
Right.
when
So why
I
would
tend
I?
to not think when people rattle these names off, they tend not to mention the Root or anything owned by black and brown folks. Me too. Shout out to the Latinx community doing their thing. But I noticed that when I was watching things like that, it was often journalists parachuting into certain communities and explaining how these people live to white folks. And I know how I live. I know how and why my cousins act the way they do because they talk to me. I talk to them first before you do. So I don't need somebody flying into these communities explaining it poorly.
Well, and it's
So-
also
so
like
people who aren't going to visit
exactly,
that
and it's
don't look at
also
us.
like
Right.
obviously this wasn't for me because I know this. So it's just
Yeah.
another like it to me. It just further illustrates like this was not made for me. This was not
Right.
made with me in mind
Yeah.
at all. Like
Yeah.
this is for other people to consume, and so eject.
Yeah.
Like I'm not watching
we
this.
good.
And taking all that into consideration because we had the equipment on deck and Maisa was skilled and really, just well versed in taking beautiful pictures of black and brown people and with TLC and making sure that they were shown and showcased in a really favorable light provided us with enough confidence to help us kind of get things done and kind of get that ball rolling initially. And from there, we just kept filming, figuring out which stories we wanted next. And then, now we're in a space where people are approaching us saying, these are the folks that you might want to pay attention to and highlight. And that's how we know it's working. But the next step would be to corral a number of artists, photographers, writers, videographers, because we can't consistently tell these stories. As much as we're trying to share, we can't consistently tell a story that's directed, filmed, and edited by Ali and Maisa. We need other people to, I don't want to come to Seattle and tell a Seattle story. I need people from Seattle to tell the Seattle story. I can tell you my story and how I see Seattle, but somebody's gonna look at that and it's like, that's not real, and that doesn't make us any different than the people that I was just complaining about earlier. So we need to, kind of continue to empower people to see that you can tell your own story. Here is how you do it, or here is how we've done it so far, and now you guys can use this model to, hopefully rock with us and tell whatever it is that you want to share, and we'll definitely make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
What is a patron, and how can people become patrons?
Patreon.com is the source of some income for us. So we have supporters, man, paying supporters who have been down. Dominique has been down since day one, so I appreciate it. I appreciate
hardcore
you.
supporter.
So
since
people
the
sign up,
beginning.
and each month you can offer whatever level of donation you're comfortable with, from $1 up to $250. And people have been giving generously each month, deducted from your bank account. You sign up with a debit card, and you're able to receive a number of different gifts depending on your level of donation. So that's one way. If that is not, your jam, you don't want to get down like that, then occasionally we host screenings of our stories. We've done it 3 times now here in Seattle, a couple of times in some other cities across the country. We're looking forward to doing it again, hopefully again in Oakland. We want to do it in Los Angeles and New York real soon. And people have been coming out, and this was something that we kind of stumbled into. Originally, we thought that we were only going to be showcasing these stories online, but it works well on a big screen at SIF Egyptian or at the Northwest Film Forum, and people have
Or
been
at the
coming
Atlanta
out,
Film
or
Festival.
at the Atlanta Film Festival.
Hey.
People have been coming out,
Yeah.
kind of just giving their money to watch our stories that they could have otherwise seen for free online. So that's how the community's supporting us, and they have been really forgiving, because as we've been learning how to do this stuff, people have been watching, and it's been like, okay, I'll forgive those audio
Those audio
issues
glitches.
or those hard edits. Yeah. So it's all love, and people are really supportive, and that's the only way that we've been able to continue to go, because as working artists, this shit gets hard sometimes, and it's expensive to do it,
Absolutely.
and
Starving
it's
artists.
right.
It's time, it's
so
time.
for people to open up their wallet and come out of pocket to kind of continue to rock with us has been really moving and really inspiring.
Motivation.
Yeah.
And then t-shirts.
T-shirts.
T-shirts are online.
Online,
Everything.
man.
So if you become a
Uncode.com.
patron, I think we just were looking at it. If you become a patron for $25, what?
Sorry, you said it's like an ad.
If
You kind of have that
become-
ad voice.
If you become a patron for $25 a month, you will receive an Uncode T-shirt in black or white. So that's our little commercial for that.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to be a patron, you can just go on that store and put that thing in your cart. We also have bags and hats. He's modeling the hat right now.
Merch, right? That's weird.
I'm modeling
Yes,
the t-shirt.
and yes,
What's
Dominique
up?
stays, representing with the Uncode T-shirt.
Were you wearing
but-
your hat in the picture?
Yeah.
I wasn't, but if you guys
weren't?
want to take another one, then we definitely.
surprised. You took it
I-
off?
Listen, man. Every time we, yeah, I did.
I'm
Every
surprised you
when
did.
when we do go out and there's we have to take pictures for interviews or whatever. I'm definitely making sure the
They'll see.
Uncode
Don't
is
worry.
square.
Don't worry. There will be a picture.
Right? Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap. I got to be in Kent
For sure.
in 10
I
minutes.
have one last
That's not
question
gonna
Yes.
that I don't think we addressed. How long have you been in Seattle?
2 years.
2 years, going on 3 years now. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think people say that it takes about 2 years to kind of get acclimated here. So we're still waiting.
In order to
I didn't know.
It's
2
I'm
years.
warming up. I'm warming
2
up.
years until you fall into the sunken place.
Is that what it is? I mean.
You know what the
I had a
Bay
lady on
Area?
the- listen, man. I had a lady on the train the other day. I have a moleskin notebook,
Yeah.
and it's bendable. That matters because her reaction to this bendable notebook is ridiculous. And so she steps on the train, and her eyes are super big when she sees me. And I thought it was just because she saw me.
Yeah.
It was just like a big black man. I'm immediately scared. I'm used to that look, so I don't really think too much of it.
Yeah.
Until I saw her looking down at the notebook, and then she very loudly was like, "Oh, I'm not even going to tell you what I thought that was." Well, now I know what you thought it was. First off, also you see me bending this thing, and if you saw my Noskin notebook, on I have like a Uncode decal on it with big block white letters on it. So what pistol do you know has white letters on the side of it? But for you to get that shook and to make this announcement on the train that you thought that I was. That like I brought a gun and we just have it by my side, just lackadaisically carrying it. But so what freaked me out, not that she said it, although that probably should have in retrospect, but I like turn and I see like the transit whistleblower with the flashlight on the train, and I'm like, man, like had he been someone else, had she reacted a little bit differently, had I reacted a little bit differently, there would have been a situation on this train that's all because she thought. And she projected this whatever upon me. So that's what I mean by people like, y'all have to, black and brown, us, because I'm one of them now, we have to work. It's just a different type of work here being in the city, and just comforting white people all the time is a non-stop job here.
I've seen like mid-20 white dude tatted from head to toe, big ass knife exposed, just chilling. And I was like,
And nobody,
I wonder.
and nobody takes into consideration how unsafe you feel with that person, or just being here around majority white folks, how you feel unsafe.
Yeah.
But I have to take into consideration how worried and how nervous and scared they are when they come to the South End.
Right. It's crazy.
All the time, I have to feel for you. I have to be empathetic. Being a good person is it's hard work. You got to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Conscious
Like you
of
can't,
that, yeah.
right? Like you can't not be if you're a good person, whatever good you did, you have to do all of that and then some tomorrow. It's a lot of work, and to be that good of a person to white people all the time, you're supposed to be my ally. Not to
Right.
whatever. Anyway, we can talk about this all day. We usually do. So we need to put a stop to it.
But thank you both for.
I like
for
the
giving us your
mood
time.
videos, the meditative ones.
Thank you for
Yeah.
those. I work really hard on those.
I love
I
those.
like
them
get
too.
no love. I'm like, man, these are
I like
great.
Yes.
I love them.
They're great.
Is that
Watch
all you
moves.
use? I like it.
Watch movies.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. It's a creative way to use our B-roll.
Yeah,
That's what I was wondering. I was like, is this B-roll?
Yeah.
or
It is. It's
okay.
all B-roll. I mean, some of the footage comes from like we actually use in stories, but it's all B-roll, and it's really just meant to just be a vibe, like Zen, just like watch and listen to
That's
the.
exactly what it does.
Yeah. Well.
I'm big and I'm like, what like that?
Good.
Using my mobile device to watch it.
That's right.
Right.
And retweeting and social media, all
That's
that,
it.
engaging with the content.
So
Thanks for having us.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
At
everything
the Uncode.
is
At the Uncode.
THEUNCODE.
Get the t-shirts, get the hats, become a Patreon,
If you're a creative,
subscribe to the YouTube.
Get at us. Yeah.
Yes.
This is Maisa with Uncode. Stay all black. You've been listening to No Blueprint.
This is Ali with Uncode. Forever I love Atlanta. Los Angeles, always in my heart. Seattle, we're getting comfortable. Slowly but surely, we're becoming more and more acquainted. Shout out to the Scene with No Blueprint, man. We appreciate y'all and everything you've done for us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's dope. That's dope. That's dope.